one of the big narrative lines of 2020, of course, is how important it is for scientists to communicate to the public. And although your field of expertise is far away from coronavirus, I wonder if you see your work in those sort of broader terms of the importance of being able to communicate clearly how science works, and how important it is for there to be that level of engagement with the broader public.
Yeah, I do think that's super important. That's a big part of what I do online. So, one of the things that I do on Twitter is I talk about, the latest spacecraft or result or, whatever's going on in my academic field. But I also talk about just things that I care about as a person. I talk about academia and what it's like to be an academic, what my life is like, how we interact with each other, how we communicate, how we come to conclusions about the world. And part of the reason I do that is that it's part of a broader strategy to help people understand how scientists work, who we are, what we think about, what we care about, the fact that we are people with concerns outside of our academic discipline. And that's, the purpose of all that is really to help people have more trust in scientists, or at least just understand our motivations and to understand the motivations of the scientific process and scientific institutions. Because I think that when it comes to situations in which people don't trust scientists, a lot of that is because of a lack of understanding of why we do what we do and how we do what we do. And so even though I'm not working in a field that has any public health or national security importance or whatever, I can be part of the process of demystifying the institution of science for the general public in a way that can help to allow people to have appropriate context for what scientists are doing. And I don't think that I don't want to pitch it as everybody should just believe scientists no matter what and just sit and do whatever the scientist says. I also try to be open about the ways in which science has been used to harm people and oppress. That's a big part of our history as scientists, and we need to be aware of that and open about that, especially because a lot of the communities we might be trying to talk to are certainly aware of that, and that factors into how they think about science as an institution and scientists as people. And so acknowledging all of those aspects of science and how it's been used and who we are is really important, and helps to have the kind of dialogue we need to have with the public.
How did things change for you after this? Like on a day-to-day basis? Did it feel mostly the same, or did things really feel different?
It felt different for sure. I mean, we're legit. So I mean, we are part of, like I said, we're part of history, and so it's a different feeling. It's not just a job where you're just focused on a specific task. It's just a completely different type of job. And like I said, it's luck as well. I mean, luck plays a big part of it as far as my part in it. I just happened to graduate at a certain time, and I took a job and moved up here. But like I said earlier, I was a shy person and I hated giving talks. I was encouraged to do it, but I rather, at the beginning, would have rather just focused on building the machine and running it and operating it. But I was encouraged to be a science communicator and do outreach. And so after the detection, we had a story. We had an awesome story. And I worked on that as far as my own personal way of sharing the story, just so that I have a lot of energy and passion and excitement still just for that first detection. A lot of my fellow collaborators are like, it's the first one. I mean, that's old news. There's so many other cool detections that we have, but I still I still love the first one, and I still get excited about it, and I always talk about it every time I'm out there. And so, yeah, and I don't know if that's maybe a reason why, but I get a lot of requests to give talks, and that's part of it. So it's because of this huge story, and then the way I tell it. But then the other thing is I'm Indigenous, and there's not that many Indigenous. I don't know what operator or scientist, physicist, whatever. But I don't know what I call myself nowadays. But there's not that many people like me, and so I get a lot of requests. And that's a juggling act that I've been trying to deal with, just how to handle that, how to learn to say no sometimes. I try not to ever say no whenever it's a community that's, an underrepresented group. If it's an Indigenous community, I'm always going to say yes to.
Do you see the enterprise of writing popular books as essentially in the same category but a different medium as the other ways that you interact with the broader public, giving lectures, doing podcasts? Do you see this as all one big enterprise with different media, or are they essentially different activities with different goals in mind?
I think it's part of a continuum. They're not exactly the same activity, but they're part of the same landscape. They reach very different audiences and they have very different impacts, right? Like, to me, the book is still the most profound way for one person to say ideas that are communicated to another one. You have enough room to get it right. I mean, I laugh because I'm friends, Jennifer, my wife, is a science journalist, so we're friends with a lot of science journalists. Some of them also write books, but most of them, focus on articles. And a lot of them, even who write books, they don't like it because is all this work I got to do? I can't just get a story out in a week or whatever. And I love it. I love writing books so much. You tell me you got 100,000 words to explain things correctly. I am never happier than that. But okay, not everyone is going to read your book. You sell tens of thousands of books if you're lucky, right? Whereas if I'm a consultant on the Avengers and I can just have 1 or 2 lines of dialogue in there, the impact that those 1 or 2 lines of dialogue have is way, way smaller than the impact you have from reading a book, but the number of people it reaches is way, way larger. Yeah. And, Twitter and social media and podcasts are somewhere in between that. So, I'm very pleasantly surprised that the podcast gets over 100,000 listeners to every episode, because we talk about pretty academic stuff. We get pretty heavy and intellectual there sometimes, but it warms my heart that so many people care about that stuff. And I'm a big believer that all those different media have a role to play.